What if standing up for your garden gnome led you to own your HOA's biggest tyrant's mortgage? Join me on my wild quest for quirky rebellion. Hey there, Porch Patrol Squad. Let me know if you've ever locked horns with a Karen like in today's story. Smash that like button and spill the tea in the comments. And if you're craving more outrageous HOA battles, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. Believe me, you don't want to miss how this unfolds. The rhythm of the meeting pulsed like an over-caffeinated drum, every tick of the clock punctuating the growing tension in the air. Karen's composure wobbled dangerously, her pastel cardigan seemingly smoldering as she took in the chaos of inflatable gnomes bouncing at the perimeter, each adorned with cheeky slogans and beaming grins. "This is preposterous," she declared, hands planted firmly on the table, her piercing blue eyes darting around like a shark searching for a way out. I could see the gears turning in her mind as she attempted to recalibrate her grand plan of dominion, her indignation reverberating throughout the room. The assembled crowd, fueled by the spirit of creativity and rebellion, was nearly giddy, practically buzzing with excitement over how absurd everything had become. Taking a deep breath, I prepared for my moment of truth. "Ladies and gentlemen, and esteemed President Petty," I began, my voice smooth and steady. "Today we uphold not just our rights as homeowners. No, we honor the laughter and joy that make our neighborhood a tapestry of vibrant expressions." I waved my arms grandly, and the assembled gnomes appeared to nod encouragingly. It was probably the most expressive crowd I'd ever addressed. The montage of visual punchlines was almost hypnotic. Encouraged by the hilarity of the moment, I continued to elaborate on our blossoming gnome arboretum, painting this whimsical picture of a neighborhood where eccentricity flourished like wildflowers. My words tangled effortlessly in the air, infusing every corner of that dull meeting room with the audacity of the garden-gowing spirit we had ignited. Karen, who had been resiliently clutching at her authority like a life raft, started to realize this was no ordinary gripe session. It was a full-blown fiesta. I could practically hear the wheels screeching to a halt in her head, her expression dancing between outrage and embarrassment. "You can't just turn the HOA meeting into a circus," she blurted, though I could sense the facade of her authority teetering. The room erupted in laughter, fueled by Mike's playful retort, proclaiming, "At least we managed to bring a circus to Karen's little town hall of snooze." His Hawaiian shirt, bright as a sunbeam, complemented the enthusiasm in the room like confetti to a party. Rallying together, our laughter forged an impenetrable bond against her growing anxiety. We were simply too whimsical for her rules. But the best moments came not from my grandstanding, but from the residents I had come to cherish and admire. Betty, from the third house down, with the flowery sun hat and habit of watering her succulents at odd hours, stood up, her gnome named Sir Giggles balancing on her arm like a regal pet. "I'll have you know, Karen, this gnome has a PhD in making people smile," she declared, heightening our resolve while effectively challenging Karen's snobbish governing. Each resident took turns, sharing their newfound harmony with decor, their garden gnomes, and their steadfast refusal to conform to a carefully manicured lawn. The more they spoke, the more we simmered in camaraderie, fueled by an air of collective rebellion. With laughter echoing resolutely through the hall, I felt a surge of pride for each individual contribution, understanding that Karen's grip on our whimsical home was steadily fading. As the meeting spiraled toward its grand conclusion, I couldn't help but savor the sweet, ripe taste of victory. "So let me propose the ultimate resolution," I shouted, throwing my arms wide open to draw in all the attention. "May we, the residents of Maple Grove, vote to embrace whimsy as our fundamental neighborhood principle." A collective gasp swept across the room, followed by loud cheers and persuasive chants for gnomes, tigers, and flamingos that danced harmoniously beneath the starry, metaphorical fabric draped across our neighborhood. We were fired-up visionaries ready to claim our creative rights. I couldn't help but share a fleeting glance with Mike, our silly banter echoing through the hall, each of us riding the wave of jubilant mayhem, glee spilling over all around. The voting process was almost anticlimactic. as residents clutched the miniature gnome representations of themselves as if their very existence depended on it. All in favor of whimsy prevailing in our gnome-filled revolution, I swung my imaginary gavel, flinging it down with dramatic flair. Almost unanimously, hands shot into the air, glares of exerted authority replaced by bemused grins. I basked in this defeat of Karen's ho-hum attitude, aware that my victory was not mine alone. It belonged to every resident bold enough to take a risk. Motion passed, I declared triumphantly, the echo of my voice bouncing off the walls as laughs erupted alongside the customary celebratory gnome dance we'd planned. Karen, still reeling but adorned with a look that blended respect and disbelief, finally cracked a tiny smile. "Well, we'll have to see about making new bylaws then, won't we?" she retorted, her acknowledgement bringing the evening full circle. Even Karen's gradual surrender seemed like part of the riotous play we've all agreed upon. With every raised gnome in the room, I marveled at the metamorphosis this meeting had undergone. Somehow, laughter had become our most potent weapon against conformity, transforming fear into festive celebration. As the crowd dispersed, bustles of animated chatter lingering in the air, I felt a warm glow settle over me. What would be next for Maple Grove? Surely an even grander adventure awaited us at the end of this new chapter. As the meeting finally adjourned, the jovial mood in Maple Grove began to permeate beyond the drafty hall, spilling out into the streets like confetti from a broken piñata. Our community, once clouded by Karen's unyielding rules, now felt more like a vibrant garden rather than an oppressive grid of lawn maintenance restrictions. I stood beneath the bright glow of the porch light, high-fiving neighbors with gnome figurines in hand. Our absurd gnome revolution had ignited a fire of whimsical defiance that nobody, including Karen, could extinguish. Even her stern visage was now punctuated with reluctant admiration, the gleam of defeat reflecting off her tailored cardigan as she walked away with a peculiar pep in her step, possibly plotting her next course of action. Mike, ever the dramatic comic relief, leaned against the porch railing, grinning from ear to ear. "You know, buddy, I never thought I'd witness a bunch of grown adults celebrating garden gnomes like we just discovered fire," he laughed, shaking his head disbelievingly. I chuckled, knowing he enjoyed the thrill of this newfound freedom as much as I did. But the victory had only just begun. I had seen a fissure in the once ironclad reign of Karen Petty. Plans began to swirl in my head like colorful fall leaves in a wild wind. Perhaps this was the beginning of something bigger. Maybe I could rally these fine folks into devising an HOA policy that didn't just promote safe gardening but embraced every shade of whimsy that existed. The thought alone made my heart race with excitement. Before long, a crowd gathered around me as if I'd just announced a piñata-themed shindig. Words of encouragement showered down like rain as neighbors suggested ideas, ranging from gnome-themed parades to flamingo races. Slightly absurd, yet so vastly entertaining that I couldn't help but envision us co-creating a festival of all things eclectic. What if we instituted an annual Maple Grove whimsical lawn day, where no decor choices go uncelebrated? I proposed, my enthusiasm contagious as eyes lit up with glee. Voices rapidly chimed in, offering fancier names along with their own unique spins. Our small community blossomed into a brainstorm bonanza that echoed laughter and left the dreariness of conformity panting in its wake. Little did we know that our joyous celebrations would soon collide with the more serious side of community standards and regulations. As whispers of our whimsical day spread beyond the borders of our neighborhood, Karen seemed to hunker down, consulting mysterious tomes of HOA bylaws, her look reminiscent of an angry librarian about to unleash a stack of overdue notices. The more we embraced the chance to color outside the lines, the more delightfully panic-fueled her response became. The rules were made for a reason, she roared, but her sentiments only fueled our fervor. Every attempt she made to restrain our creativity only propelled us toward greater heights of absurdity. There was no stopping us now. She'd inadvertently sparked a wave of rebellion fueled by pure silliness and the collective joy of rebellion. But as I reveled in our victories, I caught whispers of something brewing. Secret meetings among the extended residents discussed how we could take a more proactive stance in our HOA meetings. We all understood that gnomes on lawns were just the colorful icing on the cake. Why not take a peek at the community bylaws ourselves? I pondered aloud, proposing a dramatic recommission into the labyrinth of red tape. I felt like a kid pretending to be an undercover spy in a world filled with garden decorations as Mike and I, armed with coffee and an insatiable curiosity, set off to the HOA office one fateful afternoon. The HOA office was a stark contrast to the vibrant scenes we'd crafted. Its walls were plastered with rules that seemed more like a prison sentence than actual guidelines meant to foster community. The sizable bulletin board was a monument to Karen's oppressive regime, each sticky note a reminder of sins committed through the joyful act of individuality. "All right, partner in crime," I declared, channeling my inner detective as I rummaged through the outdated references for purity laws. "This is where we turn their own rules against them." As we dug deeper, a pattern emerged. Loopholes lay in the fine print, waiting to be discovered. There it was, a clause that hinted at the possibility of recreational art displays within the neighborhood, and our gnome army suddenly became a symbol of artistic expression. We were on their turf now, and the absurdity of the rules began to weave a tapestry of outrageous possibilities. In the days that followed, our newfound audacity cascaded into an avalanche of community creativity. From lawn gnomes to flamingos, decorations blossomed everywhere, transforming our quaint neighborhood into a peppy carnival bursting with color and happiness. Karen's rebuttals grew feeble, dissolving faster than a popsicle on a July afternoon. Our rebellion garnered attention, drawing folks from adjoining neighborhoods, even bringing them to our whimsical lawn day. The flowers of freedom we watered last week had transformed into a riot of delight that left even the most hardened HOA members questioning their authority. I half expected them to don flower crowns and join in. As I surveyed our artistic explosion one sunny Saturday, the feeling of community wrapped warmly around me. Children giggled while playing amidst the gnomes. Neighbors exchanged recipes under umbrellas adorned with flamingos, and I finally felt at peace. With the frost of Karen's reign thawing, I raised my coffee cup for a toast to the whimsical insanity we had cultivated and dared to push further. To Maple Grove in its kaleidoscope of imaginations. Every cheer echoed in defiance, lighting the path to even grander misadventures ahead. In that moment, I realized we had created something spectacular. No one should ever feel limited by stifling rules. Who could have predicted a garden gnome would change everything? Maybe now was the time for a larger revolt against mediocrity. What could possibly come next? As soon as Karen Petty strutted away, her oversized glasses practically vibrating with indignation, I was left standing in my yard, gaping in disbelief. 120, 0 for a gnome? In the grand hierarchy of violations, I never thought my love for quirky lawn decor would earn me a fine heftier than some folks' mortgages. I glanced over at my trusty gnome, Barry the Bold, beaming with his whimsical smile despite the looming threat of financial ruin. A plan began to sprout in my mind, one that would not only challenge Karen's petty power play, but also give me immense satisfaction. I would find a way to retaliate against the HOA that dared to punish my creativity. I sprinted to my best buddy Mike's house, fueled by a sense of purpose that could rival any action hero. His garage was a shrine to DIY projects, and a veritable treasure trove of kitsch, and I could always count on him to bring the comic relief I desperately needed. "Hey, Mike," I shouted, bursting through his tool-strewn basement entrance as he wrestled with a perplexing IKEA furniture assembly. "We need to talk about the HOA and its resident nightmare, Karen Petty." Mike looked up, his sandy hair sticking out like a malfunctioning porcupine. "What now? Did your garden gnome start a riot?" "No, but it might result in me being the proud owner of a 120-0 garden gnome if we don't act fast," I exclaimed dramatically, recounting Karen's ridiculous ultimatum. Mike burst out laughing, a reaction I was fully expecting. "You've got to be kidding me. Do people really care that much about a block of ceramic and paint? What's next? A ban on lawn flamingos?" I could see the gears turning in his head, contemplating our next, slightly devious, move. Amidst chuckles, We concocted a plan so ludicrous, it almost felt like we were plotting a heist, but instead of jewels, we were after a quaintly absurd act of revenge. As we brainstormed, it became increasingly clear that if I was to combat the unique injustice of being fined for garden decor, I would need to escalate the situation. That's when my light bulb of inspiration flickered on. What if I bought the mortgage on Karen's house? After all, her inflated sense of superiority extended into her finances as well. She'd been bragging at the last neighborhood BBQ about just purchasing a shiny new SUV. "Do you think it's possible?" I asked incredulously. Mike leaned back, a smirk dancing across his lips. "In theory, you could put that little HOA tyrant in her place while funding her disastrous shopping habits." The next day, we both donned our best financiers of chaos outfits, which, for me, meant an oversized vintage t-shirt depicting a garden gnome doing yoga and shorts that could only be described as bold and marched into a local bank. With the gusto of two rebels fighting for free garden expression, we laid out my plan to acquire Karen's mortgage. As I unrolled blueprints of her pristine suburban home, complete with an arrow pointing to the gnome chapter of doom, the banker's brows furrowed in amusement. But soon he too found the humor in the absurdity and processed our application for financing. It was a dazzling whirlwind of paperwork, but I felt wildly triumphant, like I was stepping into a superhero franchise where the villain's lair was a meticulously manicured lawn. Weeks later, the paperwork was signed, and I found myself strutting back through the neighborhood, no longer merely a homeowner, but the proud owner of Karen's mortgage. My chest puffed up as I waltzed past Karen's house, imagining the shock on her face when she found out that the gnome-loving troublemaker was now the debt viceroy of her domain. The best part? With the power of the mortgage, I had a newfound ability to exert influence over the HOA. Who would dare fine me or challenge my gnome again? The opportune moment came one drizzly afternoon during the HOA meeting, an event where Karen presided like a queen dispensing orders to her minions. Tension crackled in the air as she read out new rules that threatened to dethrone garden gnomes and declare war on unglossy paint colors. I could hardly contain my excitement when I raised my hand, flipping my new ownership papers between my fingers with a cheeky grin. "Excuse me, Karen, I have something to add. I'd like to formally propose that garden gnomes be celebrated instead of fined." Her eyes widened, disbelief washed over her face like a tidal wave, and it was the most exquisite sight I'd ever witnessed. What could Karen say now, with the weight of my mortgage ownership hanging over her? "Does anyone want to second that?" I quipped, reveling in the glory of the impending chaos. There, I had my revenge, and no amount of rule enforcement could ever take that victory away from me. Would my eccentricity win out over her ridiculous tyranny? Or would the absurdity of this HOA drama escalate even further? Only time would tell, but I was ready for whatever absurdity awaited next in my quest for ultimate neighborhood peace. The day of the HOA meeting loomed larger than Karen's oversized chin-length bob. The drizzling rain outside mirrored my excitement, a symphony of mischief brewing in my backyard, where Barry the Bold stood faithfully at attention. It was my secret weapon, each glint of his ceramic grin a reminder that this was about more than just a ridiculous fine. I had gathered a small army consisting of my equally disgruntled neighbors, riled up by Karen's tyrannical tendencies. Everyone had a war story to tell. Greg from 2 doors down had lost his veggie patch to the weed police, and Linda with the flamingo family got her flock issued a cease and desist order. We were more than united. We were a force to be reckoned with, a comedy troupe armed to the teeth with grievances and gnomes. As we settled into the stuffy meeting room, Michael leaned over and whispered through suppressed laughter, "You ever think the press should be invited? I mean, this is a serious potential documentary material." Truth be told, I'd been thinking of calling Netflix a Real Housewives of HOA series featuring our delightful escapades might be just what the world needed. As Karen began her power speech, issuing fines and unnecessary regulations like a dictator confused by an IKEA instruction booklet, I felt my resolve solidify. It was hilarious, really, how this microcosm of suburban doom had birthed such oppressive creativity. And here I was, ready to turn the tables. The moment was electric, and my heart raced as I raised my hand, waving the mortgage papers like a flag of freedom. "Excuse me, Karen," I began, every ounce of confidence surging forth. "I would like to bring an idea to the floor about our favorite garden buddies." Karen's piercing blue eyes locked onto mine, narrowing like she was scrutinizing a bad font choice on a flyer. She clearly didn't expect a revolt, let alone from the resident gnome enthusiast. But here I was, a rogue element in her careful suburban utopia. "Let's celebrate gnomes, especially Barry here," I added, gesturing dramatically towards my invisible gnome as if he were my trusty sidekick, by my side on this noble quest. The tension in the room was palpable. Gasps ricocheted like errant golf balls, and I swear a chandelier trembled, sending a shard of nightmarish doubt up Karen's spine. "I'd like to formally propose that we remove all fines regarding gnomes, and even establish a Gnome Appreciation Day. Imagine lawn decorations galore, festivity, and smiles all around," I concluded, almost breathless from the thrill of spouting ludicrousness, but also achieving a remarkable slice of revenge-driven genius. Silence enveloped the room. Was this a collective gasp of horror or laughter hiding just beneath the surface? "Second," Greg hollered, pumping his fists like he had just won the lottery. The momentum shifted like tectonic plates, rattling the very foundation of Karen's reign. "Not so fast." Karen shot back, her indignant tone echoing into the depths of her condescending repertoire of scorn. "This is hardly a serious proposal." At that moment, I simply couldn't resist. "You know," I started, my voice dripping with sarcasm, "compared to some of your outlandish rules, this is practically a Friday night celebration." Laughter erupted from the corners of the room, and for the first time in history, I felt like we might actually derail her carefully curated reign. In a twist that could only be described as delicious, the floodgates had officially opened. Other neighbors, emboldened by my deliriously absurd pitch, started chiming in. "Why not a flamingo day?" Linda shouted, waving a rose-colored feather she'd presumably plucked off one of her unauthorized flamingos. Even Mike was on a roll, suggesting a kitsch carnival, where the community could showcase all things beautifully tacky taped socks, googly-eyed flower pots, you name it. The air filled with camaraderie as Karen's dictatorial grip loosened, and I could almost see her vision for neighborhood purity crumbling one hilariously ridiculous proposal at a time. Just as I felt the tide turning in our favor, Karen, flustered and raging like a tornado with a bad haircut, drew her composure. "This is outrageous," she bellowed, her face beet red as a ripe cherry tomato. But it didn't matter. The spirit of rebellion had ignited a clarity in everyone present. As she barely managed to regain the meeting's attention, I leaned over to Mike and whispered, "You think we should draft a new neighborhood constitution while we're at it?" He snickered, which was the only encouragement I needed to press on further. Was this the end for Karen's petty assault on garden creativity, or merely the beginning of the true HOA revolution? A few laughs, a couple of supportive shouts, and a proposal to celebrate gnomes later. The final vote was taken. The evening was packed with palpable tension, anticipation, and humor as I watched Karen's reign teeter on the brink like one of her treasured porcelain figurines. Would we emerge victorious from Karen's iron grip, or would she rally forces to dismiss our whimsical revolt? Whatever the outcome, one thing was clear: this would be a night to remember. Would I walk away victorious, or would Karen unleash a new wave of absurd fines? Only the next meeting would tell, but knowing my eccentric crew, we were just getting started. The moment Karen's face flushed to the color of my garden's prize-winning tomatoes, I knew I had struck a nerve. The room, now buzzing with laughter and the spirit of camaraderie, seemed to swell with the collective belief that we could indeed topple the porcelain throne she had constructed out of rules and regulations, every bit as fragile as a well-placed garden gnome. Mike leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, grinning like a cat that had just swiped the cream. "I can't believe it's come to this," he chuckled. "But hey, if Barry can lead us to a gnome-centric revolution, I'm all for it." The gnome stood resolute in my mind, his ceramic grin leading the charge, ready to push back against years of repression by our HOA overlords. Actually, dedicating an entire day to gnomes suddenly felt like a gateway to a greater idea. Why not propose a whole festival of kitschy yard decorations? As the meeting unfolded, I could barely contain the ideas bubbling in my brain like a freshly watered seedbed. "Ladies and gentlemen," I declared, standing up to stretch my arms out wide as though I were on stage at a sold-out concert, "if we can create Gnome Appreciation Day, why not expand on the theme? Picture this: the first ever whimsy weekend in Maple Grove. Every resident goes all out and decorates with whatever brings them joy. Lawn flamingos, inflatable unicorns, that weird Bigfoot statue Larry bought on clearance last year. We'll celebrate individuality and creativity in our neighborhood like never before." The place erupted with applause, laughter, and a few jeers at Larry's unfortunate home improvement tragedy. Karen's lips curled into a tight, disbelieving frown, the kind of expression one wears when they've just found out their favorite brand of mayonnaise contains gluten. "You think people are going to want this? It's banal," she scoffed, but even her words seemed to tremble like a tightrope walker on her last leg, and no one would dare participate. The challenge lingered in the air as I shot her a knowing smirk and replied, "Well, that's the beauty of community, Karen. Not everyone is as devoid of fun as you." A crescendo of support broke out around the room, agreeing that her flavorless authority was no match for our merry brigade. As Karen fumed, the room transformed into an electric playground of brainstorming. "We could even hold a best of show contest," Greg shouted, bouncing in his chair like an overzealous puppy. "I'll start working on my prize-winning vegetable garden in the shape of a friendly dinosaur." We erupted into laughter at the mental picture of a triceratops fashioned from tomatoes and zucchini, and I found myself reveling in how much creativity everyone seemed ready to unleash. It was as if the sheer absurdity allowed us to harness our pent-up frustrations, finding refuge in the notion that we could dance on Karen's meticulously manicured lawn of rules. Of course, an ultimate prize would have to be established for the winner, something that would serve as both a reward and a gentle reminder of our unity and rebellion. Mike piped up, "How about the prized gnome itself? The Golden Berry Trophy." "Yes, the Golden Berry, a homage to the victory of ridiculousness over oppression. If only we could have it as a glittering centerpiece at the festival, like our hero standing tall, surveying the realm of the ridiculous that united us all." And just like that, the idea gained momentum, spiraling quickly into a collaborative effort that would leave Karen's icy authority shattered in its wake. However, Karen was not going to just toss the crown to us. She was limping toward a meltdown that might redefine dramatic exits. "This is ridiculous," she exclaimed, hands flailing like a frustrated bird caught in a windstorm. "You cannot possibly believe that it is within the best interest of the community to promote such nonsense." The uproar only intensified, fueled by the chaos of affirmation. But the best part? I spotted some of the more moderate neighbors, the ones who'd quietly grumbled at her authority, start nodding their heads in approval, smiles creeping onto their faces, like discovering an unwelcome weed had transformed into a beautiful flower. In an ironic twist, I concluded my proposal with a flourish. "I hereby formally suggest that we take a vote on Gnome Appreciation Day and Whimsy Weekend as a spectacle of celebration and individuality right here, right now." It was met with thunderous applause, as if we were at a rock concert and I was the lead singer. Karen could only stare, her eyes wide, measuring just how much power she was losing to the will of the gnome-loving people. "Fine, have your little vote," she relented, her authority crumbling like a day-old cookie. "We'll see what the people really want." The vote was a seamless crescendo of overwhelming enthusiasm, and as the fun-filled evening wore on, Karen's power broke, and we sent a flurry of jubilant cheers into the rafters that reverberated through the building. The result irrefutably favored our newfound tradition of backyard exclamation and whimsy. But as we left the meeting hall that evening, Mike leaned in closer, a conspiratorial glint in his eyes. "Jordan, my friend," he whispered, "the HOA doesn't know what hit them. Just imagine the look on Karen's face when she sees inflatable flamingos and gnomes adorning the neighborhood." Laughing, I realized we had only just begun. We had unearthed an entire world of bizarre creativity and whimsy that could stave off Karen's reign, a world where the joy of gardening and decor thrived free and unfettered. We had conquered not just a meeting, but stepped into the light of change across Maple Grove. A grand tale of resistance perplexity had unfolded, spellbinding us into active participants in our neighborhood saga. Would the whispers of rebellion reignite as we prepared for our whimsical weekend? Only time would reveal whether gnomes and inflatable flamingos would secure our victory, or whether the ever-menacing shadow of Karen lurked ready to morph back into action. The days following the triumphant meeting unfolded like a garden of wildflowers, vibrant and brimming with unpredictable energy. Whimsy Weekend had taken root in Maple Grove, and before I knew it, our community was abloom with decorated lawns, each one reflecting the proud eccentricities of its owners. Flamingos painted in neon hues strutted beside gnomes that had swapped their garden duties for festival roles, looking more like partygoers than solitarily ornamental fixtures. Larry's dinosaur vegetable sculpture became the unofficial mascot, a glorious amalgamation of squash and tomatoes, captivating both the children and adults who wandered by. It was an idyllic chaos, defying Karen's drab vision of neighborhood uniformity. I could almost hear the gnome army crying triumphantly, "Rejoice, for we are free." Amidst this whirlwind of color and creativity, I couldn't shake the now deep-rooted sensation of impending doom. Karen Petty had not yet responded to our community uprising. While I had taken pleasure in conjuring ideas like a confetti maker on caffeine, I knew our HOA president was brewing something sinister in her ginormous cauldron of discontent. The warning signs were everywhere. Late-night clandestine neighborly meetings soon gave birth to whispers of Karen's unruly plans to retaliate. An HOA surprise attack, if you will. It was the stuff of horror stories and HOA meetings past, tales of which we only half believed. Could she really stoop to such petty vengeance in the face of our shared delight? Then came the day I had both dreaded and anticipated. Karen's official backlash letter. The envelope was thick as a policy document, probably because it was packed with unnecessary legal jargon designed to intimidate and crumble the spirits of yard decorating felons like us. I stood in my garden and tore at the monstrosity of a letter, scanning its contents as the sun streamed deliciously down. "This is an official warning," it proclaimed, as I buried myself in her threats of fines, mandatory removal of yard decorations, and the big kicker, potential loss of property value if we didn't comply. I half wondered if she enjoyed writing her diatribe as much as I enjoyed embodying the spirit of whimsy. To summarize, she couldn't curb our newfound festivity without spitting venomous threats in our direction, making her sound more like a dragon than the HOA president she was. With Mike at my side, we rallied the neighborhood war council at the newly dubbed Gnome Dome, formerly known as my backyard. The mood was leveled up, mostly fueled by pizza, beer, and the boundless hope surging through every attendee like an ancient prophecy coming to fruition. "Karen can't touch us, not while we're united," I declared dramatically, raising my slice of pizza as if it were the Holy Grail. Our plot to counterattack was not one rooted in violence or spite, but rather memorable gardening jests served with a hearty side of laughter. This was a chance to escalate from passive resistance to genuine community action. We plotted our surprise participation in the upcoming HOA meeting, dripping in toilet humor, cute topiary, and colorful inflatable decorations that would give even Karen a reason to laugh, albeit begrudgingly. As meeting day approached like a heavy thunderhead, I could already taste the irony of our de facto freed gnome pass idea. Every resident could present a designated gnome as their stand-in at the meeting, each with a cheeky backstory that cut sharp at the edges of Karen's dignified facade. Unbeknownst to her, she'd be sitting among, metaphorically speaking, a crowd of pixelated gnome avatars. Under the watchful eyes of our ceramic champions, we will prevail, I wrote in the event guidelines, buoyed by the thrill of turning the tide against her reign while wearing bright floral shorts like badges of honor. Our gang had transformed from mere gnome enthusiasts into an audacious collective ready to plow through the absurdity. On the fateful night, the crowd roared when we sashayed into the meeting, card carriers of the Gnome Protection League, Each placard held aloft was a colorful testament to our cause. One read, "No matter what," while another quipped, "Size matters. Gnome size, that is." Even the most compliant neighbors were showing up in inflatable costumes, punctuated by deep belly laughs. And there was Karen, poised at the front, her face a spitting image of disbelief. I leaned back, enjoying every last second of her shocked expression. Who knew precisely how entertaining the sight of Karen Petty being outnumbered would be? As the meeting went on, I caught Mike smirking, the twinkle in his eye saying he was loving this dramatic showdown every bit as much as I was. "You know, she might just need to get a gnome of her own," he remarked, flipping the narrative on its head. In the end, during gnome therapy and gnome victories, I stood united with my neighbors, feeling empowered. "Not only will we maintain our decorations," I announced, "but we declare that Whimsy Weekend is now in the HOA bylaws. Gnomes rejoice." Everyone erupted into a chorus of approval right in her face, and Karen could only stare, the authority of years melting away like snow in sunshine. Would she fight back? Or might she realize that, in our unassuming garden of playfulness, we had actually siphoned away her power? That's the beauty of a true fight well poised. Only time would unveil the winning gnome. Thanks for tuning in. It really means a lot to us. If you're still fired up from this HOA showdown, check out our next jaw-dropping battle on the right. Or let YouTube surprise you with another wild ride on the left. Take your pick, and I'll see you in the next neighborhood drama.